why people were maybe experiencing PTSD, anxiety, stress, both the mother and the partner. It's a really taboo subject. So what kind of things can you say and do? Can you tell friends and family that actually you'd really like them to mention your baby's name? You'd really like them to bring a gift, or you'd really like them to come and see the baby's room that you'd spent 9 months preparing for. It's not going to be a linear process. It's going to take time.
Hello, Sophie. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Sophie, you've been working on the PATH project, the Perinatal Mental Health Project, for the past 5 years. This project is founded by the European Commission and as a part of the Interreg program, and spans England, France, the Netherlands, and Belgium.
Yeah.
Can you explain us the PATH project in greater detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, the project's funded by the European Commission and the Interreg program. There are many Interreg programs across Europe, and their goal is to fund cross-border initiatives, learning, sharing of best practice, and tackling common challenges. So the common challenge that we're tackling in PATH is perinatal mental health, and we're looking really at the mild to moderate end of the spectrum. When we put the project together, we did a lot of research, of course, and we found that in all 4 countries that you mentioned, when there are really severe perinatal mental health issues, severe postnatal depression where there's risk to the life of the baby or one of the parents, that's taken into account really well. We're very lucky to live in countries where in general, when it's really serious, it's dealt with quickly and efficiently. But on the mild to moderate end of the spectrum, what a lot of people call the baby blues, there's not much support. It's very taboo. It's very stigmatized. And that mild to moderate end of the spectrum does still have an impact on the baby and the parents and the rest of the family. So that's where the PATH project came about. And as you said, 5 years later, we're coming towards the end of the project lifetime, but we've put in place support and resources that we hope will continue to be used long beyond the lifetime of the project.
And when you started the project, what were the most significant problems you discovered in perinatal mental health, or starting the project in general?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is really the stigma around the subject. So even the research, you can't really trust the research because a lot of people don't want to answer the question or don't answer the question honestly. So the hardest thing was really establishing the link that we were trying to make between professionals and healthcare professionals and the patients or the people they're talking to, because there's so much stigma on both sides that on the one hand, midwives, doctors, whoever it was, they didn't really want to talk about the issue, and parents, mothers, partners, fathers, they didn't really want to talk about the issue for fear of being judged as a bad parent.
Okay. And how did you finally get the information?
Yeah, so the biggest part of the project, the first goal of the project was to launch a big destigmatization campaign. So in order to do that, we did a lot of anonymous social listening, which is where we went on to social media streams in the 4 countries and looked at what people are talking about, how often they're mentioning things like postnatal depression, anxiety, baby blues, what kind of things are people Googling. And we did also do some anonymous surveys as well. So in the UK, we did a survey of 1,000 people anonymously who were either pregnant or if they were the partner expecting, or they'd had a baby in the last year. And there we got some figures coming out around kind of what people were feeling, and what was the real question we wanted to ask was what was stopping them from getting help, because it doesn't really matter what you're feeling or why. The main thing is you need to get the support. So what was stopping people? And unsurprisingly, the big problem was social media, and that fear of not being the perfect social media mother or the perfect social media family. And that was a really big issue we wanted to tackle with the campaign.
And did you have more, was it the same in the 4 countries, or was it more difficult in one country, or how it has been?
Yeah, I would say the most difficult country to implement this work has been in France.
Okay.
I know you're from France and I live in France. So it's been really, it's just still such a taboo subject, even on social media. In the UK, maybe you've seen a lot of the work on social media with influencers. It's come from the US and the UK, where people are a lot more willing to show the good, the bad, and the ugly, as we say in English, the difficult sides of parenting. Whereas I think in France, those conversations are there's still kind of a more traditionalist approach to the role of a mother, and and how she should present herself and what she should and should not say. And I think that's been one of the biggest challenges, but it is getting there. It's we've jumped on a moving train, I would say, in France, and there's loads of stuff happening, whether that's government level, local level, the first 1,000 days campaign. There's loads happening. It's just getting there.
Yeah. So you had to tackle this challenge in France differently than in England or Netherlands or Belgium, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think in France, the biggest challenge was just getting people to talk about it. And it doesn't even need to be with a healthcare professional, just to friends, to family, to someone in a local coffee shop who has a baby as well. Anyone who you can open up to and just say, oh, this is hard. That's the first step.
How the subject of the perinatal loss came.
Yeah, so I think initially, as I said, we were really focusing on the mild to moderate end of the spectrum. And when you think of perinatal loss, you think of something a lot more serious.
Yeah.
Actually, loss can come at many different stages of the pregnancy or after the pregnancy, and it can also have an impact on future pregnancies. So perinatal loss was coming back time and time again as a factor towards why people were maybe experiencing PTSD, anxiety, stress, both the mother and the partner. So I think it kept coming back, and in all the surveys we were doing and the conversations we were having. And of course, when I speak about a taboo subject, it's extremely taboo. Particularly for the healthcare professionals, it was coming back in their feedback in the training was, we don't really know how to broach the subject. How do we talk about it? So we decided, it was one of our Dutch partners who'd been working with an app developer throughout the project to develop apps in the Netherlands, who came to me as the project manager and said, do we have some budget to create an app specifically for perinatal loss? And we were like, yeah, we have to find some budget because it's so important and there's not really anything out there at the moment.
Yeah.
So credit to Jacobine, our Dutch partner, and her network. They, as soon as I said yes to the budget, they got straight down to business, putting this app together, working uniquely with people who've been through the process themselves, who survived, essentially, because it's something you have to get through, you never really get over it, but you have to get through it. And they work together for about a year to put together the Loss app, as it's called. And it's launched in the Netherlands. It launched in June this year, and we've just finished translating it into French and into English, and we're working on translating it into as many languages as we can get our hands on in the time that's remaining for the project. So yeah, that's how it came about, and I think it's so important because it's such a huge factor in perinatal mental health.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to come back to what you've said about the healthcare actors and how much it's a taboo for them. We don't really realize it when you've experienced a perinatal loss. You feel like it's a taboo in the culture, for you, for your family, friends, neighbor, but you always think that everyone in the medical field is like aware, prepared, trained for that. So can we come back to that? Can you say more about how is it a taboo to them because they don't talk enough about it, or how is it?
Yeah, I guess one of the things that we've tried to remember throughout this whole project is that a lot of midwives in particular are mothers. And so a lot of them have maybe experienced it themselves when it comes to perinatal loss, or being a mother themselves. Maybe it's so emotional. I translated some of the Loss app, and as I said, I don't have children, but even just translating it was extremely emotional to read.
Yeah.
It is a very difficult subject, and I think, I mean, I can speak from someone who grew up in the UK. The NHS, the National Health Service, is incredible. The training is amazing, but I think when it comes to loss of a baby, that's something that no training can really prepare you for, how you'll react, whether you're a professional with 20 years of experience, or even someone like me who's not confronted with it face to face, translating part of an app. It's such a difficult subject that I think, on the one hand, you as the professional are worried about how you'll react, but you're also worried about what kind of emotions you'll provoke in the patient, and how do you deal with that? It's quite scary, really, to think, how will I bring about that subject? Because you're a trained healthcare professional, but you're not a trained psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist. And I think that's the reason why people just avoid the subject, unfortunately.
And so you've created the Loss app. So what is the purpose of the app? Is it like, for who is it, and what is its goal? And
so I think that the first real target group of the app is someone who is going through that loss now, and as soon as something like that happens, where do you turn to? And the app is just full of information about it. It's very much practical, so the practicalities of what do you do, birth certificates, funerals, all the kind of stuff. You don't,
all the kind of stuff you don't think about.
Because you've never planned for that. No one goes into a pregnancy planning for that. So all of that practical stuff, and I think the goal of the app on that side of things is to really try to take as much of the burden off you as possible, and tell you exactly who you need to talk to, where you need to go, and also tell you what kind of things can the hospital or the healthcare professionals do for you. So if you don't want to arrange any of those formalities, I'll call them, then there are people that can take it all away for you. But if you want to do it yourself, and you want to arrange a funeral, which I'm sure many people do, as part of the grieving process, then how can you do that? Where's the support, financial support, emotional support? So that's one part of the app. And then another part of it is the emotional and physical coping with what happens next. So there are some tips on how to grieve, what kind of things you can say to your friends and family. You mentioned earlier it's a really taboo subject. So what kind of things can you say and do? Can you tell friends and family that actually you'd really like them to mention your baby's name? You'd really like them to bring a gift, or you'd really like them to come and see the baby's room that you'd spent 9 months preparing for. So it's all those kind of things. Obviously, grieving is different for everyone, and an app can't tell you exactly how to grieve, but it's really there to just give you some ideas of things that you can do, and also just to normalize the fact that it's not going to be a linear process. It's going to take time. And I think the biggest thing is really to just try and alleviate that feeling of guilt that I think a lot of mothers feel. What could I have done? Why has this happened to me? Is there anything I could have done differently? And really the answer is no. And that's such a hard answer to hear, because you want answers and you want to know why, or maybe you want to blame someone, whether it's yourself or the healthcare professionals that supported you. But the app is really just to take you through all of those different questions and feelings and rationalize them so that you can grieve as well as you possibly can in that kind of situation.
How did you personally feel working in this field?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think I'm the only person working on the project who has never been pregnant or had children, and I would like to one day, but I wonder if it was almost a conscious decision from my boss to make me the project manager, because I went into it being able to dissociate any emotional feelings from getting the work done, which, as you can imagine, with this kind of project, it's 15 different partners in 4 countries with 8 million euros. You've got to keep things on track. And I think that's been really important. But as I've continued in the project, and I mean, I'm 5 years older now than I was when I started the project, and maybe much closer to wanting to start a family than I was 22 when I started the project. I feel really emotionally connected to the project and the subject, and I feel really, really lucky to have had the opportunity to learn about all of these subjects. And even, as I said, translating the app, it was really emotional to learn about perinatal loss. But I feel so fortunate to have had that information, because if one day it happens to me, and it happens to so many people that we never hear about, I feel like I'll be I'm sure it's something you could never really prepare for, but at least I'll know a little bit more who to talk to, where to turn to. So I feel really, really fortunate to be involved in this project. And I think if every 20-something-year-old who wanted to start a family could access the kind of information I've accessed by managing this project, we could avoid so much hurt and suffering on the long term. And that's also another goal of the project, is that this information, including the Loss app, the goal is that this information gets to people who are thinking about starting a family, because at the moment there's no one really Googles "I'm thinking about starting a family," or if you do, then it will take you to pregnancy information, but you're not even pregnant yet, so you don't need to you don't want to know that stuff. So that's part of what we tried to create, is resources for people like me, and maybe even take some of this into schools or higher education as some just basic learning of preparing for preparing for parenthood. Is not easy to say.
I'm really glad you're saying that, because usually when people, because it's a heavy project, it's a heavy subject, people don't want to get to the information because for them it's first too heavy, and second, they don't want to, like, if you want to have a family, you don't want to go into this subject, you want to go in the happy subject, you know. So I'm really happy you're saying that, because at the end, you didn't, it's not a negative feeling you had, it's just a positive feeling that you had the information. So now you know where to turn, maybe not what exactly how to react, but you have the main points. So it's important to have some feedback like you, because some, like, usually people are saying it's just too heavy, too dark for me, I don't want to approach the subject. So
and I
thank you for
understand
that.
But I think ultimately, and it's a very cliche saying, but information is power. And the more you know, the better you can deal with any situation. And the more you talk about it as well with your partner, with your family, then whatever happens in your journey to becoming a parent, you don't have to keep it all to yourself and suffer in silence. You can, and my partner will probably tell you, he knows as much about perinatal loss as any non-father in France, because I talk about everything I do and tell him everything, because I want us, if we decide to have a family together, to go through it together and have as much information as possible. And if I've learnt one thing from this project, is making things taboo doesn't benefit anyone, whether it's the person going through it or the people around them or the professionals around them. It doesn't help. It just makes things worse.
Yeah. And what would you be your message? Well, you've said a little bit of your message, but what would you say to someone who is just looking for some information? He's kind of, it's a bit stressful for this person because, you're scared to go into this subject. What would you be your advice?
Yeah, I think something that has come out of this project for me personally is talking to friends or family members who have had a baby. You learn so much, and they're so happy to talk about it because no one really ever asks them, how was your experience? Everyone's like, oh, so nice, you had a baby, oh, great. But no one ever says to them, how do you feel? And how was it for you? And I think just talking, and a big part of what we've tried to do is set up peer support, including in the Loss app, just talking to someone. Because I think talking to a healthcare professional can be quite scary. That feels very real. Whereas if you just talk to someone who's had a baby at some point, whether it's your friend who has a newborn baby or your grandmother, and saying, how did you feel? What was it like for you? I think that can really start some conversations that you never expected to have. And then, of course, online, there's loads of information. What we've tried to do in Path is to bring all of that information into one place, to take away that scary, daunting task of filtering information, which is difficult on the internet. We've created a hub, Path Perinatal EU, where you can just find all trusted, really researched information in one place. So yeah, I think my message would be just go for it, talk to someone, have a look around what's online, and don't be afraid to have those difficult conversations. If you don't understand something or you want to know more about something, people are more willing to talk than we think they are. And I think sometimes asking that question can also be a huge burden lifted off of someone's shoulders who just wants to say, oh, actually, it is hard. Being a mum is really hard. Being a dad is really hard. Raising a child is really hard. And but there's also so much wonderful stuff. But if you know that there are going to be some difficult times, you can deal with them a lot better.
Yeah. And so as you mentioned, this is almost the end of the project. Yeah. But is there any, like, the website is gonna be online and it's gonna continue to bring information, right?
Yeah.
And the Path Loss 2, the perinatal loss, the app loss, is going to be online too. And it's the end of the project, but it's not the end of what you put into place.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Yeah. So the Path online hub, as we call it, will continue to exist. Okay. What we've tried to do was, as I mentioned, link to trusted resources, things like the National Health Service in the UK, Santé Publique France in France, and the equivalents in Belgium and the Netherlands. So those sources are always constantly updated. And the goal of our hub is that you can find them all in one place. So that will stay there.
Okay.
As well as the stuff we've created ourselves. That their apps that have been funded, including the Loss app, they'll continue. We worked with external app developers, so they'll continue to exist. They're on the App Store, on the Android store, everywhere you need to find them, they'll stay there. And all of the resources that we've created, training for healthcare professionals, training for peer support workers, that training will continue in the services that we've implemented them in. So we've done Train the Trainer, and those can continue to be adapted and updated as time goes on. And they'll also be available on YouTube. So we'll have all the training sessions on YouTube. Including training, I call it training, it's not really the right word, but information giving for parents themselves on subjects like matrescence, caring for yourself as a parent. It's kind of all that stuff that we hear on the aeroplane, put your mask on before you put someone else's mask on. That's a lot of the resources that we've created online is all about. You have to look after yourself before you can properly look after your baby.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Sophie, and thank you for all your work you've done and your all the work your team have done for the maternal mental health. I wish a lot of success for the app and a lot of people getting more to the information and this subject being less a taboo. So thank you. Before the end of the podcast, do you have something to say?
I would just say if anyone wants to check out our online hub, path-perinatal.eu, there's contact details on there. So before the project ends at the end of this year, if you have any ideas, suggestions, questions, then get in touch with us so we can make sure that hub has as much information as possible before our project comes to an end. And that hub, as I said, will continue to sit there, but we want it to help as many people as possible. So please do get in touch. And thank you, Sophia, for your podcast you're doing. It's amazing. It's so important.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you want more podcasts like this, make sure to subscribe and give a little thumbs up to support me. Please let me know in the comments what resonated with you, what shifted maybe your perspective, or if you learned something new. I would love to hear it. You can find me on Instagram, and never forget, you're not alone, and together we can make a change.